See your heart and everything you beside you, giving you glory to no other. You are the one true living God. We have the great privilege, honor to come into your presence. We have the opportunity to be where you are because you came to where we are. God, we are grateful for that. We thank you, God, for loving us. Before we knew you, you loved us, and God, we are grateful. Thank you, Jesus. Jesus, we bring to you, as an act of worship, we bring to you all of the things in our lives that are troubling, that are painful, that are broken. God, we bring to you all of that as an act of worship, and we ask you, God, be God in these moments. Be God in our life. God, where we are fatigued, strengthen. God, where we are broken, we ask you to heal. Where we lack, God, you be the one who provides. Be strong in our lives, God. Not just so that we have better lives, but that your name would be known. That we would have an awareness of your presence. That we would have an understanding of the fact that you love us. And God, also that you would be known through us. That people who are faltering in their walk would be encouraged. That those who don't know you, God, would be brought into right relationship with you. God, be strong in our lives, in this place, and God, through this place. In your name, Jesus. Amen. Amen. You may be seated. So today we are in Romans chapter 12. Verses 9 through the end of the chapter, 21. And I would like to remind you, this kind of the series that we're in is basically from Romans chapter 12 and 1 Corinthians 12, 13, 14. And it is, we're trying to take a look at the gifts of God. And I think one of the really important things, there's a few important things that I want us to always remember regarding this, is that as you look around the room, I want you to understand that you're sitting next to the gifts of God. Okay? That's really important, I think. Jesus said that we will be known as his disciples because we love and care for each other. Not because our doctrine is perfect. I'll bet yours is as messed up as mine. Not because we're amazing human beings and pretty, but because we love one another. And in that, there's something that is, when people who don't know Jesus see the people who do know Jesus as loving and caring for one another, people want to be a part of something like that. You know, one of the things that I think our society is crying out for today is to belong to something. And a lot of people, frankly, are belonging to something that is not going to matter in 20 years. It kind of almost doesn't matter now. but things of eternal value. Boy, if we can encourage people to be a part of that, and a meaningful part of it, that's a big wow. That'll make a difference. If we remember that, I love that new song.
Yeah, me too.
I love the picture. If the stars were created, if the galaxies were created to worship God, then so will I. They're mute. They have no consciousness. But they proclaim the glories of God. And that's what worship is. If nature declares the glory of God, then so should we. And this series on the gifts of God, this really is about how do we worship God? How do we proclaim Him in our daily lives? How does that happen? We do that because as we reflect Him, we do those things that He has called us to do. We are those things that He has called us to be. We live our lives in a way that exemplify His nature, His character, what He has already shown us. So, as we look at this is not just a list of gifts. Okay? It is not that. It is that, but it's not just that. It is far more than that as an attitude and as a perspective. It is about who Jesus is and what He has done. Where has He called us from? Now, I will tell you, I try not to live in that place, but I remember who and what I was. I remember, I have said it before, I belonged to the family that was down the street that everybody talked about like this. That was my family. And God called me out of that. God walked with me out of that. I don't want to forget that. I don't want to live there. Because that's stunting. But I don't want to ever forget that the grace of God touched me. And that my response is supposed to be, God, how do I reflect you? How do I truly reflect you? And how do I worship you? Again, that song where nature, the rocks cry out in silence, but they declare the glories of God. I want to live my life that way. I want this place to be an expression of that. I want when we walk out of this place, when we gather and then we go, I want us to be aware of the fact that God called us and He goes with us. And that we have a responsibility to act like He's with us. So as we look at this, starting in verse 9 of chapter 12, the book of Romans, and remember, this is not about just trying to know it. It's about trying to live it, to express it, to have it be something, most of what we'll look at here is, it stands contrary to our natural inclinations. But we are called to that. We're called to make that kind of choice. So, starting in verse 9, chapter 12, book of Romans. Let love be genuine. Abhor what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not be slothful in zeal. Be fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be conceited. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. For by so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. You know what? Everything he says in here is hard. I would even say that it's impossible. That without God, it is not possible to do this.
Right.
If it were possible to live that way, we wouldn't need God in a lot of ways. Everyone would be doing this. Let love be genuine, abhor what is evil, hold fast to what is good. And this is an important picture that we're given here. Let love be genuine, let it be, and here's a really important thing that from time to time we need to be reminded. Love that is spoken of here is not emotional. It's not ooey gooey. It's not how I feel about you or you feel about me. And I'm grateful because I'm not always lovable. I know. A lot of you will be shocked by that, but the truth is the truth. Those people who know me best know that I am not always lovable. But what we are called to do here is to make the decision to care. Now this is important. Love, let love be genuine. And then in the phrasing, the verses were put in around say 1,000 years ago. The verse numbers. So as we look at this, don't be put off by that idea. Let love be genuine. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. And in that, as we're called to let love be genuine, it's that love that's spoken of there is a decision that we make, that I make toward you and you make toward me, that we make toward those people. As we go on, it gets more difficult, by the way. But as we go on, one of the things that we will see is that we are to love people who are not only not lovable, but they're mean. They're mean people. And we're called to care about them. Now, it is a challenging thing because remember, we are called to reflect who Jesus is and how he lived. How did Jesus treat those people who were mean toward him? Like a lamb toward the slaughter. Judas, who he was one of the 12 when Jesus took the role of the servant, of the lowliest servant in the household, and he washed their feet. Judas was one of those that he washed their feet. Think about that. Jesus treated Judas in such a way that the people who were closest to them all, the people who had traveled with him and slept with him and eaten with him and heard him and all of that, those 12 that were with him that whole time didn't know that Judas was the betrayer. Jesus knew. And Jesus treated Judas in a way that no one else could tell. And get the picture of it, even in that last meal where Jesus looks at Judas and says, go do what it is that you have to do, that was following when John said, Jesus, is it me? Who is it that's going to betray you? Jesus says, the one to whom I give the piece of bread. Jesus reaches over and gives to Judas the piece of bread. Then he says to Judas, what you have to do, go do quickly. Judas gets up and walks out, and everybody's looking around going, I wonder who it is. That's how we are to let our love be genuine. Now, this is a really important point as well. Jesus died for the sins of the world. Jesus did not wink at sin, nor should we. If there are people that are behaving badly, we need to be able somehow to express to them, you're behaving badly, and I love you. Here, let me walk with you. That's something, that is, I mean, I don't know about for you. That's not simple for me. Because I want to treat them like the jerk they are. That's how I want to be. But what we're told to do is let love be genuine. Abhor what is evil and hold fast to what is good. And there's a picture here of, this is not indicative of this side of the room. Nor is it indicative of this side of the room. But pretend this is evil. And if I picked it up and started singing in it, you'd say, yes, that's evil. But this is evil. And the picture that's given to us here is abhor it. Turn your back on it. Go over here and embrace what is good. And we do that within the context. Look at that little parenthetical statement that he says, love one another with brotherly affection. We are to abhor what is evil. We are to hold fast to what is good. We are to love one another with brotherly affection. And then he says this, outdo one another in showing honor. You hardly ever have a game that is, the winner is the one who shows the most honor. Generally, in most games, the winner is the one who vanquishes his enemies. You know? We beat them. We won. The game that we ought to be playing is outdoing one another in showing honor. Would it be a weird thing if this was kind of a conversation? Oh yeah? You're going to show me honor? You think that? I'm going to beat you. I'm going to show you more honor than you showed me. Bring it. Come on.
Bring it on.
What a wild and crazy place it would be if we were doing something like that. But that's what we're called to. That's the ideal that is way up here. Do not be slothful in zeal. Be fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. And this is actually kind of an important thing here. Verse 12. Rejoice in hope, comma, be patient in tribulation, comma, be constant in prayer. Tribulation is surrounded by prayer and hope. Don't lose hope in the face of tribulation, in the face of difficulty. Don't lose hope. Be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. There's a connection to that. Hospitality is not just inviting people over, and this is, hospitality is this, but it's not only this. Inviting people over for coffee and cake. it is also contributing to the needs of the saints. Now, he goes from, in some ways, the old term, he goes from pastoring to pestering. In verse 14, bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. And again, if Jesus is the model, think about that. Think about the ultimate expression of that, Jesus hanging on the cross. The people walking by, mocking him, spitting at him, making fun of him. Some of the people who beat him, some of the people who pulled out his beard, the people who were abusive toward him, truly, people who persecuted him, what did he do? He said, Father, forgive them. He died to pay the penalty for their sin, the sin that they were aiming directly at him. And as he goes on here, rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep, live in harmony with one another. That's a continuing idea there. How do you rejoice with somebody who's rejoicing? Well, you have a relationship with them. You see them, you understand them, you're involved in their lives, they're involved in your life, so you're able to rejoice with those who rejoice. The same thing for weeping with those who weep, those who are in grief. How is it that we can truly be with them in that, to walk alongside them? As he expresses it here in these two sentences, in verse 15 and verse 16, live in harmony with one another. You know, harmony, if you're a musician or if you've heard musicians, you know harmony is not the same note. Harmony is a complementary note. Harmony is something that completes the chord. It goes together. It makes it more pleasant. And we are to live in harmony with people. It does not mean that we are the same as everyone else. And you take a quick look around the room. Nobody in this room is the same as somebody else. And we're not supposed to be the same as everyone else. But we are to live in harmony with others. We are to be in unity. You know, when we sing when a song is sung, when a piece of music is played, it's not just one note. That would end up being sort of boring. Instead, there's a whole bunch of notes, and they all flow together. The words flow together. They're not all, it's not all the same word. But there's a unity in it. There's a purpose in it. And we are to live in harmony with others. So when people rejoice, we walk along with them and we're able to rejoice with them in their rejoicing. We're able to weep with them in their weeping. When they're in grief, we're able to walk with them in that and to experience, to let them take strength from us. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be conceited. One of the kind of, I think it's sort of an interesting thing about this, from a translation perspective, this can actually be read, and you would not be violating the text at all to read it. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. It can actually, and I'm going to do kind of a free translation here, but it can actually be understood to say, don't think that some that there is any kind of work that is beneath you. Don't be afraid to do something that you think is not appropriate for your station in life. It can be translated that, not just understood that way, but it can actually be translated that way. And it sort of makes sense. Both of these things, both of the ways that it's translated can be, they're both good. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Or don't be afraid to do something that is beneath you. Never be conceited. The idea of conceit does not mean, if we're called to be not conceited, that doesn't mean that we deny any abilities or gifts or skill or talent. It doesn't mean denial of that. I worked with a guy one time. We were building a church. Actually, it was a building, and we were building it. And one of the things that he told me, he was a retired bridge builder. Very sharp guy. If you're not sharp and you start a bridge, you've ever seen the cartoon where you start a bridge on this side, you start a bridge on this side, and they end up like this in the middle? It actually takes some skill to make them meet where they're supposed to meet, so that everything is joined together and it's safe to travel on. Well, that's what he did for a living. Back in the days when you had to do a lot of the work with a piece of paper and a pencil, where you didn't just plug it into a computer and have it pop out the stuff that you needed. No, you had to do it, you had to figure out all the angles and everything that way. That's what he did. And he told me one day, it was really fun to work with the guy because he was very, very wise, and he just would say these things and would make me just think, man, I hope someday I can be wise like that. And he said, we're talking about at that church there was a lot of volunteer labor, and volunteer labor is not always really consistent, and all that. And he said, we were talking about roles and jobs and things that needed to be done. He said, I never mind sweeping the floor. And a lot of times he would give an hour or 2 hours at the end of the day. He would give an hour or 2 hours just to clean up the site, put things in order and make sure everything was ready for the next day. He would do that kind of stuff. But he said, I don't ever mind sweeping a floor, but he said, it's not always the best use of my time. And I thought, here's this guy who I know, because I've watched him, I've worked alongside him. This is a humble man. This is a man who just wants to get the job done. And he's willing to go sweep the floor. That's not really his station on this job site, but he was willing to do it. And I think that there's a message in that, there's a picture in that there aren't any things that, if they need to be done, they need to be done. In the book of Acts, in the 3rd chapter, where the apostles realized that their time was being not spent wisely, and so they put people in charge of certain things. It wasn't that those were not important. It was so important that the apostles looked at it and said, this has got to be taken care of in a better way than we can do it, because this is where we're supposed to be. So we need to find people who will do this. That's true today, by the way. It's not about position or any of that. It's about what needs to be done. And let's approach it from the perspective that this is reflecting God, His kingdom, His work. So never be conceited. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to what is honorable in the sight of all. It's actually a lot of fun sometimes to repay evil with evil. I'm all alone there, I'm sure. And you're all, your breath was taken away because I confessed that. But I feel like it's true. Oh, you want to treat me that way? Okay, that's the way you want to play. Do what is honorable in the sight of all. What a call. If possible, so far as depends on you, live peaceably with all. So we are told to let love be genuine. We are told outdo one another in showing honor. We are told bless those who persecute you. We are told to live in harmony with others. And we're told to live peaceably with all. And the kind of the qualifier of the idea is living our lives, behaving in a way that is honorable. Anybody that would look in from the outside would say, that's an honorable thing that's happening. How did Jesus treat people? He treated them with honor, respect. He loved them genuinely. He gave honor to people who weren't necessarily due honor, but he gave it to them. He reflected that. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. And by so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. Now to me, this is the picture of that Paul gives here of the burning coals on top of the head. I was reading this week and kind of doing some study and all that. And one of the things that I found is that there was a custom at that time. It was an Egyptian custom. And it was when a person showed true remorse for behavior toward someone, or they were doing penance for behavior that was bad, apparently, literally, they would put a tray on their head and put burning coals in it and walk around that way. Who thought of that? Honestly, where would that come from? Who would think, this is how I'm going to show that I'm sorry? I'm going to take a tray, I'm going to fill it with burning coals, and I'm going to strap it to my head and walk around with it. That is really bizarre. But it was a real thing. It was a custom that was done in Egypt at that time. And there is, it kind of, that may be what Paul is referencing here. There is certainly a spiritual thing to it that is, from a spiritual perspective, when you treat somebody who is treating you badly and you treat them well, you pray for them, you honor them, there's certainly, that's a hard thing to be aware of when you know that you've treated somebody badly and yet they're treating you with respect. That is something that causes a person to struggle. It also, just to let you be aware of this, it can also say they're easy. So I can get whatever I want from them. But the picture here is kind of summed up in verse 21. Do not overcome evil. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And that picture there of being overcome by evil, that doesn't mean, I believe, that does not mean that we are swept away by evil stuff, by bad things. I think that it means rather that we begin to respond out of evil. And think of it like this: if you're going to the beach and the waves are coming in, and you step out into the waves, if you're overcome by the waves, all of your clothes are going to be wet. You're going to be swept away by them. It's going to overwhelm you. It's going to knock you down. It's going to, so when you stand up, you're going to be soaking. You're covered with it. The picture that we're given here is, don't let that happen. Rather, stand firm in what it is that you're supposed to be about. And what we are supposed to be about is who Jesus is and what he has done. What furthers his kingdom? What lets his name be known more fully? In that, we stand against it. We are not overwhelmed by it. Rather, it beats around us. So today, as we receive communion, I would like to challenge you that if you would remember what Jesus did for us. What did Jesus do for us? How did he treat us? He didn't wink at our sin. He didn't say, you're good enough. No, his love for us was genuine, and it was expressed powerfully. He was not overcome by it, even though he gave his life for it. Our sin, he was not overcome by it. That's a really important thing. Now, in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, where Paul tells us that he gave to the Corinthian church the essence of what that Last Supper was about. He gave that to them. He told them that. And it was that on the night that Jesus was betrayed, he took the bread. And these are, you'll need to kind of work at this a little bit. At least I do. These are one package here. He took the bread and he broke it. And when he broke it, he said, take this and eat it. This represents my body, broken for you. Jesus, we remember that you left heaven. You left that place where you were honored. You left that place of power. You left that place of creation where the creation flowed out of. You left there to come here for us. And you came here physically. You were really beaten and you really felt it when your beard was plucked out. You were aware of the scourging. You knew what it felt like physically. And this represents your body that was broken for us. And we ask you, God, to help us to remember that living our lives it's an expression, it's a reflection of who you are and what you've done. Let that be, God. Now, if you're able, I confess I struggle with these words. If you're able, go ahead and eat the bread. And Jesus, all recorded for us that after supper he took the cup and he said, drink this in remembrance of me. It's a representation of the blood that was shed for us. And it was not a plan B. It was from the very beginning. The plan was that you would shed your blood for us. You said, without the shedding of blood, there can be no remission of sin. The sin stays with us if you don't shed your blood for us, Jesus, and we are grateful. And I ask you, God, to help us to remember that as we drink this. And in remembering it, help us, God, to live our lives differently. To reflect who you are and what you've done. I ask it in your name, Jesus. Amen. Amen. Jesus, again, we're yours because of what you did. We're yours because you loved us. You leaned into where we are. You came here. God, we are grateful. I ask you again, God, cause that to make a difference in our lives. The choices that we make, the way that we respond, the way that we react, God, cause it to make a difference. Help us to reflect you. In your name. Amen.
God of your promise, don't speak vain or silver or empty your voice. For once you have spoken, all nature and science follow the sound of your voice. As you speak, the heart precious one, and child you died to save. Give your life to love, and so will I. Like you would again 100 billion times. But what measure could amount to your desire? You're the one who never leaves the one behind.
Hehehehe